world. Welcome to Rex Arthur Show, or what we used to call it Rex Arthur TV, the LGBTQ site channel with a humanistic approach. And today we are going to discuss about LGBT demographics. LGBT demographics has to do with the numbers of LGBT persons in a certain area. And the area we're going to discuss is the world. Now, why are we going to discuss about the world? We're going to discuss the world because LGBT people are found in every population in the world. And many people, the bad say, LGBT things or things to do with gay people are from the West, or they are European, or they are white man, or they are if you know poor people, or they are rich people. Everybody has their own view of what a gay person is or where they relation, be it poor or rich, black or white. They have gay people, they have LGBT people, and the only thing that would differ is in the population, in the type, in the numbers and the degree. Like you'll find in some areas, there are more transgenders than others. It is for certain reasons. And as I said in the other video, I was going to do and I'm still doing that research, study of genetics and LGBT people, because LGBT personalities are biological, they are physiological. There is such a thing. If you go through our videos, there's a video posted by Science, ASAP Science, and ASAP Science has discussed how the gay gene is is biological. It is real. It is in all of us. We have a gay gene. It's just that in some people the gay gene is dominant, and others it's recessive. And I don't want to go into that because I'm not going to talk about that. That's not what we are doing the video. Today the video is all about numbers, and we're also going to do another numbers video, and that's going to be the LGBTQ markets, because where there are people, there is money, and LGBT people are people. Now, let's go on. Now, in the LGBT demographics, one has to be careful. You have to put a warning caveat, that LGBT demographics are very hard to find because, number one, very many people are closeted. When it comes to sexuality, they don't like talking about their sexuality. So getting numbers is very hard, especially if you're in a country that, number one, is homophobic, number two, has laws that criminalize homosexuality, number three, countries that do not recognize same-sex relationships. Those countries, the LGBT numbers are very small, and you'll only find them in hidden quarters in a country. But in countries that are open up and have allowed same-sex relationships and do not criminalize homosexuality, you are able to get good numbers. So the numbers I'm going to go through today are basically from Europe and a bit of South America and Asia. And those are the good countries. I mean, the countries which have opened up to LGBT people. Even though Africa is a very big continent, meaning it has very many people, but because of homophobia, especially in legislation and culture, it's a bit hard to get numbers. It's not easy to go and approach an African and ask them, what is your sexuality? And they would not tell you. And it's a very private, so it's a sketchy number. Actually, it's only South Africa that we have a very good figure from South Africa that we'll also share. So let's go on. Now, I would want to do this in order, but because of I don't have the the equipment to do that properly, so I'll just do what I have. I've collected countries. So I want us to start with Australia. Australia is um, um, a country in next to Asia, and 5%, it is said 5%, it's not so clear, but around 5% of the population are LGBTQ. And then now we go to Brazil. Brazil is also at 5%, and Brazil is more than 50 million people, actually almost hitting 80, if I'm not wrong. I can't recall my numbers. And Brazil has 5%. So that means it's a very sizable, there are millions of LGBT people in Brazil. That's a country. Millions are LGBTQ. And that's good because Brazil is a very diverse country. There's blacks, there's whites, and there's those in the middle. And that tells you that LGBT life is found in all of those people. Then now we go to Canada. Canada is 6%. And then we have Denmark. Denmark is around 3% with 5 million people. 5 million people, a very good country. It's not so heavy populated. So when it's 3%, what that means is that approximately around just nearing about 100,000 to 100, somewhere there below that, are LGBTQ, which is, as I've said, 5 million is a very small country. So 3% would be around 100,000, people who are LGBTQ. But that's still a good number. For a small population, it is a good number. And then we go on to France. France, with a population of 67 million, 5.4% are LGBT. So that generally means, if we do our mathematics very well, that's around 3 million. So also LGBT persons in France are in the millions. They are in the millions. Then we go on to Germany. Germany has 80 million people, roughly 80 million people. And 7.4%, that's almost 10%, are LGBTQ or identify as LGBTQ persons. That's a very good number because that means roughly 7 million are LGBTQ. Beautiful. Oh my goodness. That sounds lovely that there's 7 million people in Germany who are identify as gay. Good. Now, next is Ireland. Ireland is 4 million people are, the population is a population of 4 million people, and 5% are LGBTQ. So, what does that mean? That means around 50,000 are around 50,000, if I'm not wrong. I'm so sorry. I'm doing the math in my head. So, you have to do half of 10%, because 10% of 4 million is 400, is 40,000. Because, no, not 40,000. 10% of 4 million is 400,000. So 5% of that is 200,000. So it's around 200,000 people are LGBTQ in Ireland. Then we go to Israel, a very nice country for LGBT persons in the Middle East, which is also very closeted because of religion. Islam and most of the Abrahamic religions are closeted when it comes to homosexuality. They oppose homosexuality in their religions, but they have homosexuals, they have LGBT persons And that's why also we don't have numbers from the Arab world. And it's but they are there. They are LGBT people in those countries. It's just that it's hidden. They are what you call, I like calling hidden data, dark data. It's dark. You have to go deeper to find that data. And so in Israel, 11% are, wow, big number for a very big, not a big country in terms of population. And that's good for an Abrahamic nation, because these Abrahamic religions have a problem with LGBT people. And Israel, of all Abrahamic religious countries, Israel has done very well because they don't take religion that seriously. So that's why the LGBT people have freedom. In Tel Aviv they have a lot of freedom, and it's a good thing that science is also backing the number. 11% is more than 10%, which means it's a sizable number of people who are gay. Then we go to Japan, and Japan is at a very good number of 7%. And the Japanese population is quite large. It's around 126 million people, and 7%. So this means roughly 10 million people are LGBTQ in Japan. So this is another country where millions are LGBTQ. Beautiful. And then we go to Netherlands. 6.4% are LGBTQ with a population of 16 million people. So that tells you that around 800,000 are LGBTQ. Well done, Netherlands. Very good country, by the way. I like Netherlands for being a very free country. Legally, you're to be free to do whatever you want, as long as it doesn't harm somebody. And homosexuality doesn't harm anybody. It doesn't harm anybody. It's just between you and your partner, and you and your client if you're a sex worker. And that's all. These things, these countries where they have so many laws and they still have prisons, and yet you have in Netherlands, they don't even have very many laws, and there is no one in prison. Makes you think. Anyway, that's another time, another discussion for another day. And then we go to South Africa. Wow, let's go to our homeland, the motherland of humanity, not only of Africa. And this is South Africa. South Africa, the population in South Africa is 54 million, and 4.9 million people identify as LGBTQ. That means the it means around 10% are LGBTQ in South Africa. That's beautiful. And I'll also do another video one time, not this time, about the constitutions in the world that recognize sexual orientation. And to my surprise, very many constitutions do not recognize sexual orientation, even though they have gay marriage. And that's weird. It's not good. In my view, it's not good. I think it's good for constitutions to have that statement that no one will be discriminated even based on their sexual orientation. So far, as I'm doing my data mining, I've only found two constitutions, and that is South Africa and I think Sweden. Yes, those are the two countries that have used the term sexual orientation. Of course, other countries allow gay people to live and do without the term, so it's not a must to have the term basically for you to exist, but it's just a good way to show that a country actually affirms the reality. So, big up to South Africa. Big up. And also Sweden. They've done well. But for South Africa, more so because it's in Africa. And this constitution was written by Africans. And both black Africans and white Africans who chose to live together. You know, South Africa had the choice. They had the choice to chase away the whites. Yes, they would have if they wanted to, but they didn't. And they wrote a constitution. And this constitution was written with blacks and whites, and all those in the middle wrote it. And they realized that it is true. We do have LGBT people in our society, and they need to be protected and they need to be recognized. And that's what South Africa did. And look, they have given us LGBT persons in the millions. Of course, there are other African countries. Africa is 1 billion. So, roughly 100 million people are LGBTQ. Yes, even more. I bet you, because there is, when you're in Africa, you know what's happening on the ground. But because of homophobia, and not just cultural homophobia, which is brought also by religion, but also by the state itself, which is secular. It's supposed to be secular, but because it has religious people, it tends to act religiously and therefore supports religious sentiments. So, because of all of those scenarios, there is dark data. You will not know. You can't know who is LGBTQ in Africa. In most African countries, apart from South Africa, you can't know. It's the only people you could know are maybe transgenders and those who come out as gay, or those who come out as, and they say that they're intersex and all of that. Those are the only ones. So it's still, but the hopeful part is Africa is going to change because the whole world is changing. I mean, Africa, where are you? Come on, wake up, wake up. Everybody is waking up. In the next video we're going to look at LGBT markets. My goodness, China is going to make money out of LGBT people. It's beautiful. So this thing in Africa that people are running away from LGBT persons is hogwash. It is economically unsound, and we'll talk about that later on. Good. And now we finish with Spain, which is for 46 million people with 6.9% being LGBTQ. Wow, that's nice. Very nice country, by the way. Um, nice men there. And we are very happy to hear that Spain is free with 6.9%. So, those are LGBTQ numbers. And the importance of saying this is that if you do the average of this, roughly the world population, 10% of the world's population are LGBTQ. So what does that mean? That LGBTQ people naturally are a minority group. So them being a minority group means they are not a threat to anything. If people talk of threats, there's this discussion of threats, like when I was doing these statistics and demographic studies, I've noticed a trend in European statistics websites, and they are all focused on the Muslim factor because they're very few. They are noticing that because of the refugee crisis in Europe, there are very many Muslims rising, and with Muslims rising, Islam is rising as a religion that will replace Christianity in Europe. And of course, it's because number one, there are very many factors to that small population, the small numbers in Europe. In terms of, number one, most Europeans are leaving religion; they are not becoming religious. Secondly, most Europeans are not reproducing as fast as Muslims. So basically, even if they're leaving religion, they are not reproducing enough for their religions. Their religions like Christianity, because Christianity is majorly a Western Christianity, Catholic Church, the Protestant churches, all of these, most of them have their homes in Europe. So That's what's happening to the European, the or maybe not Caucasian white population in Europe. And whereas for the Muslims, they are becoming more Muslim because you can be Syrian but decide to become a Christian. If the trend was that the refugees that are going to Europe, all of them were becoming Christian, then the story would be different. It would be that even though Islam is growing, because Islam is also growing even not in Europe, it's also growing in Africa, it's also growing in the Arab world, it's just growing as usual because they are just reproducing and they don't do anything else to people to make them Muslim. But in other countries where there are non-Arab populations, they have to proselytize or they have their populations living there. So the religion is growing in non-Arab regions, which include Africa and Europe. And Europe's problem is they are not religious anymore, and then the Caucasian population is not raising people or giving or reproducing. So that's why Islam is growing. So I was really shocked that the statistics guys, they are all focused on the Muslim number, Muslim number, Muslim demographic, Muslim demographic. So, and of course, demographics is very important. Why? They help you in planning. That's why we have given the LGBTQ demographics. The reason why we've given LGBTQ demographics is number one, to let the powers that be know that they are LGBTQ people. And number two, to throw away the propaganda that says, you know, there's an agenda to take over the world by the LGBTQ people. No, there's no agenda. LGBT people are there whether they like it or not, and they will not surpass you. It's almost, till today, all LGBT persons in the world were born by from heterosexuals or bisexuals. It's simple. So in any case, if you want to attack the LGBTQ movement, you'll have to attack heterosexuals. You'll have to tell them stop giving birth. That's how you do it if you want to stop LGBTQ people, because as I've said in the beginning of this video, a lot of all of us have a gay gene. It's just that in some people it's dominant, others it's recessive. And that's and the video is there. It's science. Go and watch it on ASAP Science. And so all of that means the it means that countries that have a large population of people will have a large population of LGBTQ people. I even forgot to say China. China is a population of 1 billion people. 70 million are LGBTQ persons. That 70 million surpasses most of the populations we've mentioned in Europe. So, meaning there are more gay people in China than there are in some European countries, like Denmark is 5 million people. And China, their LGBT alone are just 70 million. Just look at that. So, what's the point? The point is that the nation setup is just a setup. It's just a setup. It doesn't mean that LGBT people are few, because if you take the 70 million LGBT people to Denmark, if they decide all of us we're going to move to Denmark, do you know what's going to happen? Denmark will be an LGBT majority nation because 70 million Chinese have decided to move to Denmark and have become and made Denmark an LGBT nation majority. It's interesting and it can happen. So that's the beauty of numbers, and we're going to talk about that in the other video. So demographics is for planning and for understanding the all of these things that happen to people, and to get data to make us make good decisions, make governments make good decisions, make governments make good laws, like the laws to help LGBT persons. Because with these numbers, then a government, it is only a stupid government that will ignore those people. Or it is an ignorant government that will ignore. Or it's an ignorant population. Because sometimes governments know what's happening. It's that the population is very ignorant. And my answer is change in the education system. I've already talked about that in my many videos, that the secret to helping people understand LGBT persons is education. Even in the other videos of the baker, the Christian baker, it is still education. Education is the most powerful tool for any movement. Any movement. Yes, any. And the best education is scientific education. Not because education can also be lies. Yes, they can be lies. But scientific education. And what's the science? LGBT people exist. It is evident. It is clear. We don't need to even shout. It is clear. So, what does that mean? That if that scientific education is given to people, people will understand, and then governments will make good laws that will make everybody tolerate each other. Okay, guys, that's all for the LGBT demographics. See you in the next video where we'll be talking about LGBT markets.